Hello and welcome to the introduction to World War One armored cruisers on the Mediterranean. Now, due to various things, I have been late in recording this, and I might even be later in uploading it, considering, well, I recorded a video about 40 minutes ago, and that's only 50 minutes long, and only 6% of it's uploaded. So, yeah, that's going on. Before I start, I'm going to, of course, mention the fact that there is a little competition going on. Bragging rights. With my aunt and uncle. Well, with my aunt specifically. But poor uncle got roped into it as part of the trophy to an extent. It's for familial bragging rights, but if I can get to 13,000 subscribers by December the 31st of this year, that's 2021, which is double the number of subscribers I have now, so let's be honest, if I'm being honest, there's not much chance, but I'm trying my best. They will both take a picture wearing Blackburn face masks that I will put up on here in the brew ships on January the 2nd. So, there you go. And these are, of course, lovely designs. They're all available at Spreadshirts, links to Discord and everything else down below, including joining the channel and becoming a patron. Which should, when this comes out, there should be a patron vote live for next month's videos. So, we start this. Well, we can unavoidably start this by having to talk about the Junicole. Because the armoured cruiser is inexorably linked to the Junicole. And I have to start off by discussing it. Now, I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it, but the Junicole, to me, is nothing new. The whole point of the Junicole was supposed to be this revolutionary idea, this young school, this great new naval concept. And let's be honest, here is what they're saying. New weapons mean small ships can take out big ships, so we don't need big ships anymore. Where have I heard that before? Oh, yes. Galleys with rams versus ships without them. Galleases with cannons. Sailing ships versus frigates versus galleons. Although, let's be honest, some of those frigates were also great ships, so they were pretty much the size of galleons. And the whole carronade debate. How can this be a young school when it's literally just repackaging one of the oldest ideas in history? Hey, government, we can make your defense cheaper and still more effective at the same time by using this new technology. It's what I call defense salesman, not strategy. And there is no surprise that it starts off with an artillery general named Henry Joseph Payhans. It obsesses over torpedo boats, it obsesses over submarines. These will destroy your battle fleet. Okay, so if you don't have to worry about the enemy battle fleet, now you have to worry about their commerce. Well, what you need is a ship which is fast enough to run away from anything that can outfight it, but strong enough to outfight anything it can't run away from. Ooh, that's your armor cruiser. Later on, your battle cruiser. This is why armored battle cruisers really should just be considered. Dreadnought armored cruisers. Or alternatively, frigates, which they could have been called. And that would have changed the world as we know it. So, let's put it this way. What is the basic problem with the Junicol? Well, it's theoretically supposed to make the smaller power able to fight the larger power. But here's its basic problem. The smaller power tends to not be able to build or commit as much of their resources to naval warfare as the larger power. So the larger power tends to be able to build just as much of the systems the smaller power is going to build, if not more, and other stuff besides. And the whole point of this is if you're going to have a swarm of torpedo boats that will descend on enemy battleships, well, why are you presuming that your enemy is not going to produce a swarm of torpedo boat destroyers, later on just known as destroyers, which will also be armed with torpedoes? Oh, it's just fun. Great for the salesman, because they get to sell the torpedo boats, then the torpedo boat destroyers. You know, they just win both ways. The Junicol for me is the real start of what I call technology rather than strategy, where its technology is taking the place of strategic thinking. So instead of having a strategy, we have a technology that gives us an advantage. And to this day, we see it at stealth. The amount of times that you see people talking about stealth as this enabler, this amazing thing for all this, and it's a replacement for strategy, is having this great technology. We don't need a strategy. We have this amazing technology. Because of this technology, we can go in and wipe out an enemy government and all their military. What do you do next? But we can wipe out the whole government. Well, what do you do next? But we can wipe out the government. What do you do next? That's strategy. Being able to answer that question is when you've got strategy. What do you do next? And what do you do next after that? And what do you do next after that? That is strategy. Junicol is not strategy. It's, we've got this technology, which means battleships are dead because we have torpedoes, and we have high explosive guns which can be mounted on small ships so they will take out existing battleships. See a small problem there? That's presuming no one builds a bigger battleship with more armor and bigger versions of those highly explosive guns. Or maybe its own rapid-firing guns to take out your small torpedo boats at ranges that they can't fire their torpedoes in. Or maybe just a ship which can operate in, I don't know, a storm when your torpedo boats will be tossed on their backs and sunk. All these things are options. And then, well, we're going to produce these armored cruisers, you know, these things which are going to go ranging around the world and will be trade destroyers. Lovely idea. Wonderful. And they'll be strong enough to stand and fight the older battleships. I can see a problem already emerging here. If you're the weaker power, and you're presuming that, you're presuming that the enemy will not convoy, which I know Britain does take ages to do in Model 1, but you do eventually get there, thanks to Jellicoe and Henderson. Doesn't therefore have an escort, and also the whole point of, yes, you can maybe stand and fight against an older battleship, but if you're standing and fighting against an older battleship, the thing is, that's an older battleship. It's annoying, it's not something your enemy wants to lose, but if they do lose, they're not going to be too upset about it. But if they damage your surface raider, the odds of your surface raider getting away from a newer battleship when it turns up, or maybe a pack of, I don't know, armoured cruisers, which your larger naval power you're seeking to fight has decided to invest in, on the idea that, Well, we can't be sure about anything else being able to kill a armored cruiser, but we can our own armored cruisers, guaranteed they'll kill it. Or maybe even they'll build a battle cruiser when the dreadnoughts come around. It's not going to be able to get away. And this brings us to the biggest problem with Unicol. It has no concept for what happens if you're actually the French and actually fighting in the waters the French are likely to fight. The Mediterranean. Where can you get away to in the Mediterranean? Where? Okay, operating from the Atlantic coast, I can understand that they can dive out into the Atlantic, maybe attack commerce if it's not being convoyed and escorted, and get back. They can do it. But in the Mediterranean, where do you dive out to? Because you're not getting past Gibraltar. There will be a fleet there. You might be fast in it, but you'll be literally having to go past it. It will be there. Plus, there's the guns of the Gibraltar itself. So, you're going to get out on the Suez Canal? Again, there is going to be a problem with that. And there's going to be a fleet operating out of Malta. So, in the nicest way, you might well not get through that sort of airspace into the eastern Mediterranean in the first place. Unless you're very lucky and very quick. So, you're left with, you'll be operating in the western Mediterranean. Cute. Well, it would take the British a long time to figure out to convoy the western Mediterranean, wouldn't it? Against surface raiders. They probably figured that one out. And that's before you get into the whole idea the British come up with Q ships. Okay. So, now let's talk about the actual armoured cruisers of the Mediterranean, the actual ships they had available. This is France and Italy. Two powers who really did build a lot of armoured cruisers. And as you can see, France built 22, 16 had been completed 1900 or later, and these ships are the ships which serve in the Mediterranean. Now, other ones transit through the Mediterranean, but this is a list of ships in class order which actually served in the Mediterranean for a significant amount of time. And as you can see, the French supply 16. Most of their newer ones are in the Mediterranean. Most of their newer ones, not all of them. Italy, who basically are exporting the Giuseppe Garibaldi class around the world. I mean, those ships just get exported like anything. I can't think why, if they're so useful for the Mediterranean, why the Italians are exporting them to everyone else. I can't think why, but the Italians have 11, 7 of which are completed 1900 or later, and frankly, they are some of the more interesting ones. You probably already noticed that I have listed which vessels have been sunk by mines, which have been torpedoed, and where I know who they've been torpedoed by, listing that. So, there is Amalfi, which is torpedoed in 1915 by U-26, which was actually UB-114 of the Kaiserlich Marine, but it was flying Austro-Hungarian colours, claiming to be U-26. You also have Leon Gabetta, that's one of the French ones. That's torpedoed in 1915 by U-5. Kleber, sunk by a mine in 1917. And Admiral Sharma, sunk by torpedo in 1916 from U-21. So, you have 4 of these vessels. 4 of them all will get sunk by mines. Well, sunk by mines and submarines. Austria-Hungary, well, that is the Sankt George, the newest of their 3 armoured cruisers of the Mediterranean. They had the SMS Kaiserin Koinin, Maria Theresa, built in 1894, SMS Kaiser Karl VI, built in 1900, and St. George, 1905. To say they're not a contiguous class is to be polite. To say that I honestly am not sure why the Austro-Hungarians were building them, considering where exactly they have to operate in the Adriatic and Aegean, and then Mediterranean, and then there is literally, again, nowhere for them to run to, nowhere for them to go. They could have saved a lot of money, a lot of time, and, I don't know, built some more Radetzky class. That would have been useful. Build some more Radetskys. Some nice pre-dreadnoughts. Yeah, build a couple more of those. That would have been useful. In fact, there are a whole list of things which would be more useful than building an armoured cruiser if you're the Austro-Hungarians. Oh, the Italians, well, they're the Italians. They love a passionate ship, and nothing is more passionate than an armoured cruiser. It's all about passion and elan at the time. And then this is why I'm surprised the Italians don't build battle cruisers, because honestly, that's really about passion and elan. But I can understand why the Italians do. It's also partially because the French do, and they want to just show them they can build better than them. But the Austro-Hungarians are more sensible than that. I expect higher from the Austro-Hungarians. I expect better from the Austro-Hungarians. They produce some very, very good ships, some wonderful dreadnoughts, and they still got suckered in by the armoured cruiser. And then we get the Royal Navy, which builds 57 armoured cruisers in total, and 35 have been completed 1900 or later. I'm just pointing this out because this is the Navy which theoretically the French were building armoured cruisers against. So the French 22 against British 57. Not quite 3-1 odds, but a significant margin of error. So, these are all the forces that British deployed January 1916 to November 1918. You will notice that, in terms of cruisers, we have finally turning up in 1916, we have Edgar, Edmund, Urlis, and Grafton. 4 armoured cruisers. By January 1917, there is Edgar, Enneman, Grafton, and Theseus. Again, 4 armoured cruisers. Out of all that fleet, out of a force of 57, they haven't decided Mediterranean is a good place for an armoured cruiser. January 1918, it's Edgar and Enneman, and Grafton. Off in Egypt and the Red Sea, technically. So, yeah. Again, that's sounding like an area which, this is something they're really keen on in terms of having these vessels there. And by November 1918, Enneman and Grafton are the only 2 remaining. Edgar is back in the UK. Technically still assigned to the Mediterranean fleet, but she's back in the UK, so she's not bothered. The problem is this. The armoured cruiser is fast by its contemporary standards. But by by 1916, World War I, it's not fast enough. The light cruisers are far faster. And if it comes up against a dreadnought, it's got no chance. Mediterranean, it might have you'd think it would have a chance because of its maneuverability, but let's be honest, most of them have about similar maneuverability as dreadnoughts. So a pre-dreadnought makes sense. That has heavy armor. It can't maneuver, but it can still blast. Unless, wait, there you go. The British have the Lord Nelsons, have Africa, Agamemnon, Cornwallis, Exmouth, Implacable, Lord Nelson. That's a fleet which you do not want to fight. So why would they need armoured cruisers? The armoured cruisers can serve a far more useful thing hunting down surface raiders, which is what the British were using them for around the world. Not something for the Mediterranean, where you don't have the space to run away, which they're supposed to depend upon. And this is the Ottoman fleet, as predicted for 1914. As you'll notice, no real armoured cruiser. Wow. A sensible strategic decision from the Ottoman Empire when it comes to naval procurement. Oh, I might need a couple of minutes to get over that. No, they had a very good navy for a long, long time. But no. Anyway, let's get back to the armoured cruiser story. It starts off with this, the Dupe de l'Homme. Okay, now, this is the other problem I have with the Junacol, because they look at that and think it's a good ship. They look at that and think it's a sensible design. They look at that and think of it as Genesis. How? Look. How? I'll get past the melodramatics in a bit, but every time I see the picture I go, what happened to you? There are some parts of it which I acknowledge are very interesting, and it's got a lot of air ducting to try and get air into its various systems. And it's got funnels and visual rangefinders, but again, displacing roughly 6,300 tons, a length of 114 meters between its perpendiculars, its longest points, beam of near enough makes no difference, 15.7 meters, and a draft of near enough makes no difference, 7.10 meters. That's, or 7.1, I suppose, but 7 meters, 10 centimeters. Powered by three shafts, powered by three triple expansion engines supplying three shafts. She had a top speed of 20 knots as designed, a range of 4,000 nautical miles at 12.5 knots, and she's armed with, and I quote, 2 single 7.6-inch guns, 6 single 6.4-inch guns, 4 single 2.6-inch guns, 10 single 47mm or 1.9-inch guns, 4 single 37mm or 1.5-inch guns, and 4 450mm, that's 17.7 inches, torpedo tubes. She has a belt, which is 10 centimeters or 3.9 inches thick, a deck of 3 centimeters and 1.2 inches thick. The conning tower, that bit sticking up there, seems to have about 12.5 centimeters or 5 inches of armor around it, and the gun turrets have 10 centimeters armor and 4 inches, which is basically the same as the belt. I do recognise that for a while, especially before long-range, direct-to-range firing came in, that it was a case of just chuck any gun you can fit at a ship and what sticks is what it's armed with. But here's the thing. If this is supposed to be your long-range raider, part of your Junacol out, logistics occur to anyone? I know I go on about this phrase a lot, but logistics matter, okay? Spare parts are at a premium, especially when you have few ports to go into.
So is ammunition, also at a premium, especially when you have a few ports to go to. Space in the hull is always at a premium because what you built is what you have. All these things are not made easy by having so many different types of gun. In fact, standardization is key. And before people start saying, well, this was their way, standardization has been around a long time. The Royal Navy in the Napoleonic Wars, in fact, every navy in the Napoleonic Wars, usually the guns on any deck were the same. There might be a couple of different ones, but the rest of them were all the same. HMS Warrior, ironclad, most of the guns were the same. Yes, there were a couple of specials. There's always sometimes a couple of specials, but there is not five varieties of guns and torpedoes. What do you have a 37mm for that your 47mm can't do? I do not understand. And again, if you're having 65mm, that's 2.6-inch guns. What? I suppose that's your rapid secondary anti-torpedo boat weapon? But in which case, you're carrying 6.4 and 7.6-inch guns. Why? They're not that different. They really don't offer you that much more in terms of space taking up. You could have quite easily made it 8 7.6-inch guns. And then you would have had 4 times as much ammunition carried for the guns you had. So if you'd only been firing one broadside, you wouldn't, sort of things would have been more sensible. And you'd have had spare parts, and it could have made. No, just no. She sold to Peru in 1912, but never delivered. So, here are some of the critical actions that take place in the Mediterranean during World War One. You have the hunt of SMS Govan and Breslau, the blockade of Austria-Hungary, the evacuation of the Serbian army, Gallipoli, Salonika, Battle of Antiveri, battles of Drazzo, Battle of Otranto Barrage, and the Battle of Impros. There are a few more actions, but these are the big ones. And yes, on many of them, actually, armored cruisers show up and are part of it. But I have to say, they don't have a stellar record for being part of them. And this will be getting into more this afternoon in live. But here is an example of some of the armored cruisers. This is the Shana class. It's just... yeah. Whilst in theory she's superior to the existing protected cruisers, it's basically just part of cruiser progression, and it just seems to me that, the Dupree de l'Homme and then the Shana class are, well, they're France clutching at straws. They're France trying to justify that they are a major naval power without wanting to spend money on the navy. And yes, I know they fight and defeat the Chinese. That's lovely. That is skillful. The Chinese Navy at the time were known for being a major power. But they weren't. And they'd just been beaten up by the British a couple of times. And then they built a navy, but it was something they were still in the process of building when the French turned up and beat them. And yes, they used torpedo boats and various other things to great effect. But that's something you can do in the way they're fighting.
The Admiral Shana class are special ships again. The idea was that you could build them even smaller. That you could build an armored cruiser and you could build it even smaller. Because let's be honest, the Dupedalon and this is a special ship, but it's roughly 6,300 tons. That I can accept. This? Oh no. Let's see if we can get this around for 4,750 tons. Let's see if we can do this for a whole 1,500 tons less. Oh, we could be really powerful. And we're going to go for 2 single 7.6-inch guns. So we've got even less space and we're still making it more complicated for ourselves. 6 single 5.4-inch guns now. Wonderful! 4 single 2.6-inch guns. And we still have the 47mm 1.9-inch guns. 4 of them. And 8 of the 37mm 5-barreled revolver guns. Oh, yippee days. Whoever in charge of logistics at that point must be crying a lot. I mean, regularly, in floods of tears. Absolutely. And you just... none of the armor goes above 95 millimeters. Most of it's 92, 90, some of it's are down as low as 40 to 50. It's just, you're now cheapening out on your cheaper strategy. You've already got a strategy to give yourself cheap ships so you don't have to buy battleships. And now, even on the ships that you're building, you're trying to cheap them out. It's just, no. Now we have probably the most successful export market of the Italians at this point, the Giuseppe Garibaldi cars. And let's just consider this. They sell 4 ships to Argentina, of which one's not... the General Belgrano is not decommissioned till 1947. The Poseidon is not decommissioned until 1954. San Martin and Garibaldi are both decommissioned in 1934 and 1935, respectively. Italy only keeps 3 of them. They sell 2 to Japan, the Kasuga and Nissan. And there is also Spain gets the Cristobal Colon, which is, I have to admit, sunk during the Battle of Santiago de Cuba, which of course is between the USA and the Spanish, because the Spanish turn up in 4 armored cruisers that, according to June and Cole, can match with old battleships, and the Americans turn up with 4 battleships, 2 armored cruisers, 2 armed yachts. I'm not saying it was an unfair fight, but I think the Americans were playing to win that one. This class, though, are slightly more in region of what I would call a pragmatic cruiser and a pragmatic oceanic vessel. They are 6,840 tons originally. That's the Garibaldi, which is sold to Argentina. The Giuseppe Garibaldi is about 7,700 tons. They are 111 meters, 111.73 meters overall. They have a beam of 18.9 meters, a draft of 7.3 meters, and they collect roughly 13,500 indicated horsepower from between 8 and 24 boilers, depending on what they're exactly running on. Their shafts, well, they have two of them, powered by triple expansion steam engines. They're capable of 20 knots and a range of 5,500 nautical miles at 10 knots, so fine for the Mediterranean. Now, they only actually have, of course, two gun turrets, which can be fitted with a single 10-inch gun or two 8-inch guns. If I had been in charge of naval logistics of any of these navies in the 1900s and someone had turned around to this and said to me, I'd have probably either shot them or myself. It just seems like a recipe for giving yourself stress. However, they do start to make slightly more sense below that because they have between 10 and 14 single 6-inch guns or 152mm, up to 6 4.7-inch guns, again, depending upon whether they have the full 14, I think, the single 6-inch guns. 10 3-inch guns, or 76mm, 6 47mm, or 1.9-inch guns. So, they're starting to make sense. They to an extent, they have the same number of guns, but at least they're standardizing to an extent. And for 450mm, that's 17.7-inch torpedo tubes. Their waterline belt is 150mm thick at its thickest and 70 at its thinnest. Their deck is between 20 and 40mm thick armor. Their barbettes, well, that's 100 to 150mm, so 3.9 to 5.9 inches. And the conning tower is 150mm, that's 5.9 inches thick. They are perfect examples of their time. Giuseppe Garibaldi is, of course, sunk by SMU-4. I think I did mention that. She sunk in 1915 by the submarine U-4. If I didn't mention at the beginning, I do apologise. The other two, Francesco Ferracini and Varese, both survived World War One. One gets decommissioned in 1930, one in 1923. Why anyone was kept around for as long as 1930, I have no idea, but I presume as a training cruiser. At least that's what I hope for their sakes, and their crew's sakes. The French, again. Now, the point is, the French do actually, at a certain point, start to try and really make their cruisers make some kind of sense. It's somewhere after the Clarke class, probably the Jules Michelet and Ernest Renan. Now, interesting enough, if you look at the earlier description and the rule that came from much of Wikipedia and those sort of things, they are considered a separate class. But this is a Brassey's Naval Annual from 1923, which is basically saying these are so similar that we're going to treat them as one class. And the subsequent two, which come after that, the Edgar Quinet class, are considered, again, so similar that the Brasseys don't actually even bother to produce a separate thing for them. They're basically going, yeah, they're modified, they have different guns, but they're the same thing. Want to know what these weigh in? 13,644 tons. That's starting to make more sense. They're 159 meters long. They have a beam of 21.5 meters. They have a draft of 8.4 meters. So it's got quite a lot bigger. This is, I would say, a little bit around double the size of our previous, the Dupré, and almost 3 times the size of the Charnet class. Has 42 Nicholas boilers, which supply power to 3 triple expansion steam engines and therefore drive 3 screw propellers, giving them a top speed of 23 knots and a range of 5,100 nautical miles at 10 knots. They carry 2 twin 7.6-inch guns. Woohoo! On the ends. That's making some sense. But now, then they don't get sensible. They
12 single 6.5-inch guns, and 16 single 2.6-inch or 65mm guns, and 8 single 47mm 1.9-inch guns, Hotchkiss guns. So that's, well, they still got 5 types of guns, but they've only got 2 torpedoes now. Their belt, well, its thickest is 152mm, which is nice and thick. Its narrowest is 58. The primary gun turrets, they have 8 inches of armour, or 230mm. The intermediate gun turrets have 170mm, or 6.5 inches. They have bulkhead armour, 3.5 inches, or 89mm thick. A deck armour of between 46 and 66mm thick, that's 1.8 to 2.6 inches. And a conning tower, which is 8 inches, or 203mm again, thick. And as they're mentioned here, the Edgar Quinet class. What's the difference between them and these? Well, finally, I don't know who finally did this. I'm presuming someone finally managed to get through naval architects who are obsessed with putting in multiple types of guns, maybe using a baseball bat. Maybe the direct control finally got into them. Maybe they suddenly realized that in, 1905, well, they're built between 1905 and 1911. At some point in that period, perhaps someone took notice that there's a dreadnought being built. I do not know. But armed entirely with 14 7.6-inch guns. Yay. 20 2.6-inch guns. So, only 2 types of ammunition, sets of spare parts need to be carried here. Two. It's just... logisticians around the world are just going, yippee! You still have to deal with all the previous class. Oh. But the new class, yippee! Oh, good lord. And 2 450mm, that's 18-inch torpedo tubes. Belt, 150mm the whole way. Gun turrets, 200mm. Casemates, 194mm. And the conning tower, 200mm. And they look lovely. And look absolutely no different. The St. George. So, I know, I've been making a lot of fun of various navies, and I'm going to make more fun of the St. George. I really am. Because this is theoretically the best armored cruiser that the Triple Alliance had in the Mediterranean. I know. I'm currently channeling my William Shatner. So, designed 7,406 tons. Full load 8,200 tons. Big girl, not the biggest, but big girl. Decent size, finally. 124.3 meters. Length 19 meters beam. Draft 6.83 meters. So the shallowest draft we've had so far. Middling for the beam, one of the longest. Has 15,000 indicated horsepower. Propulsion comes from 2 4-cylinder triple expansion engines, driving 2 screw propellers, giving her a top speed of 22 knots. However, this is the part of which they are seeking to obviously drive a logistician, at least, insane. 2 24 centimeters or 9.4-inch guns. 5 19 centimeter, that's 7.5-inch guns. 4 15 centimeter, that's 5.9-inch guns. 1 7 centimeter, that's a 2.8-inch L50 anti-aircraft gun. 8
7 centimeter, that's 2.8 inch again. L45 guns, that's 45 caliber guns. 2 66mm, that's 2.6 inch landing guns, so I'm presuming they're not mounted on the ship. I'd hope not, but I presume they're for landing. If it needs to go somewhere and land some sailors to do some fighting. 6 47mm, 1.9 inch guns. 2 3.7 centimeter guns, that's 1.5 inch. And 2 450mm, that's 17.7 inch torpedo tubes. Belt 210mm, deck 50mm, conning tower 200mm, and gun turrets 210mm. So in old money, 8.3 inches, followed by 2 inches, followed by 7.9 inches, followed by 8 inches again, 8.3 inches again. And just because I feel like bringing this up, the Mediteranean class battleship, possibly one of the nicest pre-dreadnoughts around. Top speed 20.5 knots. Load normal 14,741 tons, full load 16,099 tons. Length 137.5 meters. So the St. George, pretty much the same length. In fact, any yard which can probably build the St. George can probably build a Radetzky class pre-dreadnought. These are built in their commissioned 1908 to 1918, but they are ordered between 1907 and 1910. The St. George is laid down in 1901. So yeah. Here's the thing. Pre-dreadnoughts have been around a little bit longer than that. So, Austria-Hungary already had 2 pre-dreadnoughts. The Kaiser Karl and the... I'm not going to mention her. Anyway. If you're going to build one-offs anyway, build a one-off pre-dread. That'd be more useful than this. Especially as you're stuck in a bottleneck. Seriously, you have to fight your way past Italy, then you are in the Mediterranean, you have to fight your way out of the Mediterranean, and you're finally in the Atlantic before you can go anywhere interesting. Or alternatively, you are protecting your coastline from people attacking, in which case, armoured cruiser, not much help. Really not. You don't need speed. You need firepower. You need armour. You can't really run away. So, build yourself something with firepower and armour. I don't know, a coastal defence battleship. All these things are options. But not an armoured cruiser. Right. What have we got coming up? Bruce ships, the 56 is the last one in August. And then on 2nd September, the Persuado Patron, the 1966 Defense White Paper. Cool. And then theoretically 2 lives. There's also 5th September Bruce ships, which is possibly going to be interesting. That might well be a question-based one done through my phone, depending on where it is. Right. I'd just like to announce, if anyone hasn't realised it, that as well as these designs down here, this is now available. Possibly modified. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll join me for the live. Take care.